What is the crack, folks? Welcome along to episode 88 of the Gym Advisors podcast with me, your host, Andy Collin. And today I'm delighted to be joined by Lesley Bratty. Lesley, how the hell are you?
Doing good, thanks. Happy to be here.
I'm delighted to have you here. We've had a few cancellations. I've mentioned in a bonus podcast we put out yesterday that between myself having kind of scheduling issues and other members having kind of illness and all that sort of stuff, I've struggled to put something out recently. But myself and yourself have been chatting about this for a while. And the reason we, just as a heads up to people, the reason we're doing this podcast is we recently released a blog of yours called Physical Inclusivity in Yoga, which I really enjoyed reading. So we kind of touch on that. If you haven't read it, go back and read it now, because it's only a 7-minute read, but it's really interesting on kind of a take on yoga that you might not have seen elsewhere. But look, Leslie, I've been a big fan of yours since we chatted first, about a few months ago. Just the way you work, the way you approach fitness, the way you approach yoga. And I think by the time we finish this podcast, people are going to be the same. So I want to make sure that people get to know you a bit better, and we can kind of spread the word about how you view the world of yoga. But look, instead of me kind of rabbiting on about you and your work, why don't I get you to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Okay. So I've been doing yoga for about, hang on till I see what age I am. 24 years, I think. And teaching for about 7 or 8-ish. I sometimes have trouble remembering, when you've been doing it for so long. What age am I? What year is it? What am I doing?
Particularly what a year is it these days, yeah?
I know. So, I started doing yoga just purely for my mate thought it would be good crack, and we started going, and then really, really got into it. And I've been doing it on and off the whole time. And then when I started getting into teaching, I kind of just assumed I would teach it like everybody else does. You go to class and everybody has the same kind of method or process or whatever. And, then obviously with my diagnosis and stuff, that's all had to change. So I've done a lot more kind of research into inclusivity and how yoga can be more accessible. And I think it's made me probably one of the few teachers out there who are focusing on it, to be honest, which is a real shame. But hopefully we can spread the word and turn that around a little bit.
100%. That's kind of what struck me when we started chatting first, was it was so different to everything we kind of hear about yoga, and it's similar to, and we'll talk about it, and you mentioned in the blog, like it's like the rest of the fitness industry in that it's very, very, very social media focused, and these are the kind of person, this is the kind of person you have to be, and this is the kind of body you have to be, and whatever else. But look, your work it's kind of informed by your experience with yoga. Can you tell us a little bit about your kind of early experience, like your introduction to it? You said earlier on you just wanted to be a laugh, but like was there anything more behind it? It was just you and a mate going to a class, or what was it?
Well, we did go to the gym together, and neither of us were the most flexible people that you've ever met. I could barely touch my knees, never mind trying to touch my toes or anything. So she was like, "Oh, they're doing this yoga class in the leisure centre, and maybe it'll help us with the gym kind of stuff, and it'll be a bit of crack, and let's go." And I says, "Yeah, sure, let's go." And really liked the teacher. The teacher was great. This is no kind of no kind of slur on her or anything like that, but I did find the class hard in a way, because it was like, you do the poses and you have to do them this way, and if you don't do them that exact way, then you're wrong. If you can't look at like the picture, basically you're not doing it right. And being not very flexible, and I have dyspraxia as well, which means I'm really, really clumsy, and it didn't go well for me the first few times. And you could see people looking, like, she's not doing that right, what is she up to? And I did come out feeling quite down, like, I'm not good at this. This is something that I cannot do. Kept going because, my mate was going, and how it is when you're 16 or 17, you're like peer pressure and all that. So I did keep it up, but any class I went to, I kind of felt the same. If you're not looking like the picture, then you're not doing it right, basically.
So, like, it sounds like your early experience were quite negative, and your peer, you kept it up after the first class and then beyond because of peer pressure, which, given what we know now, peer pressure might be a good thing in that regard, at least. Like, when did you actually start falling in love with yoga as the normal yoga, and then we'll talk about the kind of how you morph that into what you do now. Like, when did you start actually going, I actually enjoyed this?
I stopped. I think I went to classes. So I've gone to classes on and off, but I stopped going to them regularly, I think, after about 2 years. And I bought like videos and DVDs because
Okay.
this was like really before YouTube was ever even thought of. And I enjoyed that a lot more because I could rewind the video or go back to the DVD and try the same thing again. And oh, I didn't quite get that. Let me try that again. Let me try that again. And you could focus on a particular thing that you wanted to do better at. Where you can't do that in a class. You can't say to the teacher, "Hold up, can you do that again? I want to like try and get that." Right. So that's when I started to really enjoy it, just doing it myself at home. And there was no judgment. There was nobody looking at you going, "You're not doing that right." And you're not looking around the room at the other people who can do it. And, they've maybe been going to yoga for years and they're, oh, yeah, I can touch my toes and I can do all the fancy things. And you're sitting there going, yeah, I hate you. Secretly, I hate you.
Not so secretly, but it appears.
Like, yeah, I've said it now, it's not a secret now, but, you're all like smiling at them and going, oh, yeah, it's great. But inside, you're feeling really wet because you can't do that and you're a bit jealous and whatever. So the fact that doing it at home, there was no judgment. That's when I really started to think, yeah, this is something that I love.
And is that like, again? I don't want to spoil the blog too much. I think people should genuinely go and read it. But like, is that even when you started to think? Obviously, you've got to a point where you're kind of doing one-on-one classes now. I mean, again, I'll let you kind of describe that later on. But is that when you started to think about the different levels, like like there should be kind of a funnel of like beginners sticking together or intermediates or whatever, rather than kind of throwing everyone together and half of the class are looking at the other half going, I hate you because you can do it and I can't.
Yeah, I did find that. When you're buying at this point in time, it's different. Now we've all got YouTube and stuff, but when you were buying the DVDs would have said, "This is for beginners. This is for someone who's a bit more experienced. This is pretty advanced." And you're thinking, "Oh, I'm a beginner, so I'll stick with the beginner thing, right?" But when you go to a class, they don't have that. Some classes do, and they'll say, "Look, this is aimed at people who don't know what they're doing," but anyone can turn up. So every class that I've ever been to has had that. Everyone's just funneled in together, and if you can't keep up, well, that's just tough on you. You have to just keep practicing, and that's it.
That's a large part of my problem with the fitness industry in general, where we just kind of lump everything in and generalize everything, and the individual is left to go like, well, what works for me? And we're leaving a world where it's like, well, if it doesn't work for me, then I'm the one that's wrong or whatever. So it's kind of, you know what I mean. So we don't we kind of expect so much from the individual when we should be the ones kind of helping them, But look, you mentioned earlier on you have you said dyspraxia, but what we've talked about before as well, and what you mentioned in the blog is that you were diagnosed early with fibromyalgia. Am I pronouncing that right? Can you tell me a little bit about what that is, and then it came at a kind of a pivotal enough time for you in the middle of your yoga teacher training? Tell us a little bit about that kind of time in your life, I suppose.
Yeah. So fibromyalgia is one of those illnesses that it's a chronic illness. It's something that you have forever, and it does get worse over time. But they're not really sure what causes it. They're not really sure how to treat it, which is great. I love that. And it causes a lot of joint stiffness, a lot of joint pain. You get muscle spasms. You get this thing that people call brain fog, where you're really confused. You can't remember stuff. Like there's times I'm sitting there going to the other half, "What's my postcode?" And he's like, "You've lived here for 7 years. You should kind of know that by now." Some people will get like IBS kind of symptoms with it as well. You get anxiety, you can't sleep because you're in pain all the time. And then people get depression from that as well. It's just a lot of pain and a lot of fatigue and a lot of not really enjoying your life too much,
And is this like, so you say in the blog you talk about being diagnosed with this? Is this something that came on? It got worse as you got older, but you had it kind of early. Like, they just come on suddenly. What was that kind of like? Why did you go looking for a diagnosis or go to the doctor initially?
Yeah. So what they do kind of think is that people who have fibro have like the genes or the underlying kind of condition, but something in your life will kick it off. So maybe like a car accident or bereavement or surgery or some major event on the body can kind of kickstart it, if you like. So I had surgery, and then from that was never quite the same. And at first I thought, I'm getting over surgery, like it was a pretty big deal, and that's fair enough. And over time things just kept getting worse, and I kept going to the GP and saying, I'm feeling really tired, or I've got this pain, or I've got that, or whatever. And I think it took them about 5 years to diagnose it, because first of all they tell you it's in your head, and then they tell you it's depression, and then they tell you they have to rule everything else out, and then finally they say, I think it's this, because we don't know what else it could be. So there was that period of time just trying to get someone to even believe you is pretty tough.
It sounds very tough, and as you talked about earlier, like it's something you have forever, and there's no real way of treating it.
Yeah.
Like obviously, when you get that news, you're kind of like shit. But is there like a relief in getting the diagnosis at all? Like with some things, there's the relief because now I know they can treat it or whatever. But were you relieved? Speaking individually, anyway, were you relieved when you got a diagnosis at least? Like,
yeah, I was, because I'd spent that time thinking, is it in my head? Am I just, is there something wrong with me, like kind of emotionally or mentally, that that they can't find anything, but I keep saying I'm sick. Like, what is it? So the fact that they've said, we know what it is, and it's this particular thing, you're like, at least I know, yeah, you can't cure it or anything, but at least I know that I'm not crazy, and there's not, it's not in my head,
Yeah, so look, it sounds horrific, and I do want to come back to how you kind of managed that, but it happened around the time you had decided to go to yoga teacher training.
Yeah.
What convinced you to go and finally kind of jump into making it a career, or making it to something you wanted to really give it a go?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I had fallen in love with over a period of time, and I found huge benefits from it. But I'd always thought, if you can't do it like the picture, you can't be a teacher, because every teacher I'd ever been to, they were thin, and they were, young, and they were super flexible and super bendy, and they could do all the things, and I couldn't do all the things. Like, there's some people, no matter how long you practice a thing, you're not going to get it. That's just, the way your body is or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of thought, I could never, as much as I loved, I could never do that. And then I started working with this girl who, she'd done her teacher training a few years before, and she taught yoga like as a part-time kind of thing. And she was like, I can't do all the things, and I'm not super thin, and if I can do it, you can do it. And then it kind of, you let it percolate around the head and stuff. And then I thought, fuck it, I'll just go and do it, and if it works out, grand, and if it doesn't, sure. Like, you can say you've done it, right?
Yeah.
That's my big career plan right there. Just go, fuck it, I'll do it.
There's lots of people who wouldn't mind being able to do it as well, like just like who get scared in one job or whatever like that. So it's not a bad piece of advice when you can pull it off, especially. But look, I wanted to talk to you a little bit then about after you get the diagnosis of fibromyalgia. You got it in the middle of yoga teacher training. In the blog, you talk about it just kind of, you were near enough the end, but you were kind of thinking, I'll do it, I'll get the qualification, but I probably won't use it after that, or at least I'll have something for it or whatever,
Yeah.
But you also talked then in the blog about your experience. Obviously, look, when something like this happens, you kind of, especially maybe with something like this where there's no necessary cure or whatever, that it's chronic, that you kind of reach out and look for a community, that people going through the same things. But you noticed that you were holding up a bit better, and you kind of attributed that to yoga. Talk to me around that. Tell me like why. When did you start noticing that, and then what did you kind of do from there when you realized, oh, this could be a thing here?
Yeah. So I, you get the diagnosis and you think, I don't know what this is. I've never heard of this illness before. So I joined loads of groups on Facebook and all that, the standard kind of, I'll see what other people are doing. And, and I kind of thought, yes, I'm sick, but I'm not super sick. I can still work, and I can still, I can't go to the gym as much as I used to and all that, but I can still do a decent amount of things. I just have to pace myself. And when I was in these groups, I noticed a lot of people were either a lot worse, or they had sort of almost mentally given up, where they're like, I'm sick, I'm in pain, this is it, I can't change that. And I kind of thought, well, I'm not as bad as them. Is it because they're older than me? Is it because they've had it longer? But after a bit of research, kind of went, no, that's not it. And then I realized it was the yoga because, like, I wake up every day and I get out of bed like a 90-year-old because I'm so stiff and sore. But then I do a bit of yoga and I feel better. It keeps you a bit more mobile. You know, I'm like, I'm never going to run a marathon, but I'm more mobile than I would have been. Where these people are not doing anything that way. They're thinking, I can't exercise because I'm sick, so I'll not bother, you know. Um, and then I started to think maybe yoga is really helpful for this and really helpful for other people with chronic pain of whatever description, you know, arthritis or injuries or
Well, look, like logically, it makes complete and utter sense. Like it's you're getting up, you're moving, your brain hasn't given up because you have something that you can latch onto as well.
Mhm.
Because I know myself, like when I've had, and this is I suppose a bit of a tangent, but it's kind of more of a everyone's got a personal story. Like I know when I have had any mental health struggles, it's been
Mm.
when there hasn't been a purpose, when you haven't been working or you haven't had something to strive towards. So even
Yeah,
having that yoga to get out of bed in the morning and know I will feel better when I do this, it can
yeah.
really help mentally, if not physically. But obviously, you're
Mhm.
find that benefit anyway.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. In you know, there's part of yoga that is, and I would kind of look past just the physical and look into the philosophical and the spiritual side as well. And there is a big part of that that's being present in the moment. A lot of the time when you're in pain all the time, you're thinking about, is this ever going to end? What am I going to be like tomorrow? What was I like yesterday? Am I getting better? Am I getting worse? Where if you can take yourself out of that and just accept where you are and be right in this moment, it kind of it takes your mind off it for a while, and it does make you feel mentally and emotionally a little bit better, and like you can cope with it better, you know.
Yeah, and anything that you can kind of latch on like that.
Mm.
I am not the most spiritual person, but I can definitely see the value of the just giving yourself that space to get up in the morning and not have to
Mm.
face into a day of pain, but also not have to rush into whatever you've planned that day as well.
Yeah.
It's a big benefit. You
Mm.
talked there about, or in the blog especially, you talked about there's a quote here actually. I'll read it here straight
Okay.
verbatim because I really liked it. The yoga I practice and teach may not be the yoga you see in any class you've been to before. So how does all of your experience, all of your interactions with traditional yoga on social media, all that sort of stuff, how does that influence how you then work to get to a point where the yoga you practice might
Mm.
not be what someone has seen before?
Um, some of it's just literally doing the opposite. If I'm super honest about it, like, because I know how I felt going into all of those classes as someone who's not super flexible or not super fit, or you know, you maybe have an injury and you can't move your arm the same amount that you could have when you were healthy or whatever it is. And it was trying to get away from the attitude that came across in those classes of you have to do it this way, and if you don't do it this way, then you're not right. You're wrong, basically. And that you have to change for yoga. And I didn't like that because obviously that wasn't working for me. But then I did a lot of research into the history of yoga and where it first came from. And initially, yoga was used as a way to help people sit and meditate for long periods of time. Like that's literally why they started doing it. But the initial way of teaching it was you had a guru and they taught a select few that they thought were the ones that were going to carry on the kind of tradition, and then they taught it to them in a particular way. These people taught it on in the same way, and the yoga was adapted to you. It was adapted to your body and what you needed. And I thought, that's what we have to do. Like, why am I having to adapt my body? And it's never going to work. Like, I'm never going to be that person that they think I should be to fit in with this like yoga standard, if you like. You know, why don't we adapt it to the people? You know, I'm coming to you and I have an injury, or I have, you know, some people have hips that are wider set apart than others, and that means that they can do a pose in a different way or whatever it is. Like, why aren't we adapting yoga to them to make it work for everyone? You know?
It's not exact as if you're sitting there and you're watering it down or anything like that. They're still working as hard. It's just that their
Yeah.
body's a little bit different and they're not getting into
Exactly.
the exact position that is. I was going to say traditional again, but obviously the traditional one is the one you're doing actually because you're the one that's kind of adapting it, that you've gone right back to its roots, you know.
Yeah.
So like I love that. I think this conversation that we're having here is like a kind of a microcosm of the industry as well. Like, we can't just throw shit at people and go adapt to that, do
Yeah.
this, do that. Everything has to be individualized, and maybe people aren't necessarily looking for that right now because
Mm-hmm.
everyone is so busy. But
Mm-hmm.
we need to be able to adapt and kind of start from a place where it's like, well, this is for you. Let's start from
Yeah.
here and improve every day, every week, whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than going, you can't do that, so you failed. Kind of.
Exactly.
So where does the industry then, like, if that's how you do your work, where someone comes to you and it's actually there's a question then, instead of going on to the industry as a whole just yet, how, like, when someone comes to you,
Mm-hmm.
what can they expect out of a class, out of a string of classes? Do you do group classes, or is it all one-to-ones?
It's mainly one-to-ones. I do have a group class that I've had these guys coming for quite a long time, and I used to have a different studio when they went there before I was more into the one-to-one. So I don't really want to say to them, "You're no good to me now." Like I'm doing this other thing, so I still do take those guys, and it's more like a bit of crack and all that kind of stuff. But it's mainly the one-to-one. So people will come, and the first session is generally what I call like a bit of an exploratory session, and we'll kind of have a chat. We don't do too much yoga the first time. It's more, what do you need? Are you coming here for your mental health? Is it your physical health? Do you want to get over an injury? Like, what is your reason for wanting to come here? What kind of physical limitations do you have, if any? Some people come and they don't. They just want a bit of me time and a bit of de-stressing, and that's cool. But if they have any physical limitations or medical issues, I need to know so I can adapt the particular poses that we're going to work on. Or if they say, I'm trying to get over a shoulder injury, can we focus on stuff that works the shoulder or strengthens it or whatever? So then I'll go through different things with them that first session of like, does this work? How do you feel? Is that sore? Is it not sore? And then I build a picture of, okay, this person can do this, but they can't do this. And we need to take it slow, or we need to do a bit more cardio based yoga, or we need to do whatever. And each session from then builds on that foundation of, you want to work on your hamstrings, or you want to have a bit of me time, or whatever it is. And we do go up and get a bit tougher every time, but in a way that works for that person's body, so they feel like they're progressing, but they never feel like they're having to do more than they're able.
Yeah.
And I always say to them, like, if you're feeling, so I'll say, right, you should feel this in your lower back, right? For example, if you're feeling it, you're doing it. I don't care if you look like the picture. I don't care if you can't get very far. I don't care if you're touching your toes or you're touching your whatever. Can you feel that? Well, then that's perfect. That's all you need.
I love that approach, in fairness. But one thing you mentioned there, and this is completely and utterly selfish question because I don't know what it is. What the hell is cardio yoga? Is it just more of a high pace? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. So there's different types of yoga that you can do, and one of them would be called vinyasa yoga. And it would be different poses that are more strengthening poses, and you would do them faster, so you kind of flow from one into the next, into the next, into the next, and you don't stop for the whole time. So it would work your cardio. It'll also strengthen different muscles in the body as well. So yeah, basically vinyasa yoga is your cardio yoga, if you like.
Well, in fairness, like, when you come in, like, I suppose it kind of reflects people coming into the industry. There's lots of jargon in it. So when something's
Mm-hmm.
got vinyasa, asana, or whatever it might be, to have these words that mean something in right now, and people
Yeah.
would know better. It's a because I I do a podcast and I ask questions, but there's definitely times where people say something, and I'm like, just gonna let that by because I have no idea what that is. So we're gonna move on to the next topic. So yeah, I'm glad I asked, and that even the fact that you had it called cardio yoga, it made me kind of intrigued and want to know a bit
Yeah.
more. So I'm happy with that. So,
Cool.
like, when you talk about the way you work, then, like, you're very much, the one phrase that you used there a minute ago was what I found interesting, was like, we progress, but like, it doesn't. You can progress and you can get better and you can get stronger without being right or wrong. You don't have to be
Yeah.
right or wrong to progress.
Yeah.
Um, do you struggle, or do people when they come to you struggle with that idea? Because yoga has such a huge pervasiveness of, this is how you do it, or whatever.
Yeah. Some people come and they've struggled even to get to the first session. mentally, because they've had this idea of, oh, everyone on Instagram is doing this particular thing, or all of yoga is standing up on a mat, and I can't do that. I'm not. So a lot of times I'll get messages from someone for weeks before they'll turn up, and they'll be asking loads of questions, and so sometimes even to get someone to a
Mm.
one-to-one session can be, a big deal for them. Like, that's a massive step for that person. And then other people do struggle with, I'll say, okay, so we're going to do blah, 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 whatever pose we're doing. So you want to turn this way and you want to reach that way and you want to, and they'll go, am I doing it right? Is this right? Am I, and I'm always saying, are you feeling a wee stretch there? And they're like, yeah, then you're doing it right. That's it. But does it look right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. We don't care.
There's a lovely metaphor for modern life there, where it's like, oh, what does it look like? What do other people say, rather than going like, well, just how do you feel about it? Like,
Yeah.
that's kind of that's I love that. I love that. But so when we're talking about the industry, yoga, all that stuff, where does it stand? Are we going in the right direction, or do you think we need to work even harder to bring people back into similar enough stuff to what you're doing, where it's kind of individualized and
Yeah.
properly makes a difference?
I think, and this is no like kind of blame on the industry or anything like that. Like, people are doing what people have to do to make a living and stuff, and that's, I mean, who doesn't? But I think the industry focuses more on classes, because that's a way of making money. You get 30 people in the door and you're charging them a fiver, and you've made that amount of money. Where if you bring one person in for that hour, you're not going to be able to pay your rent or do whatever. But by the nature of having a class, it's so much harder to tailor it. I could have 30 people in front of me and each one has a different issue, or each one has a different level of fitness. So trying to tailor a whole class can be pretty difficult. There are some teachers out there now who would say, right, here's the pose, but there's 3 variations of it. So you do whichever one is right for you. And I think that's a really big step, even to say, you don't have to do it this exact way.
Mm.
There's those 3 things, do whichever one you kind of
So,
feel
so
is
there's
right,
there's probably a balancing act there in terms of, like you said, making sure that the right people are in the industry teaching and making a difference. Like
Mhm.
like we constantly say, fighting the good fight to make sure there's enough good people in the industry, but also making sure that we get to a point where people can do the yoga that suits them and do the yoga
Yeah.
their way.
Yeah.
So like, are we going in the right direction, or is it completely and utterly, is it a lost cause?
I don't think it's a lost cause. It's not a lost cause. There's still work to do, I think.
What
You
is
know.
that work?
I think a lot of the work is more, and when people go to do their yoga teacher training, so sometimes when I was doing the training, it was just as bad. It was like, if you're doing triangle, this is what you look like. That's it. So, I think we need to start from the yoga teacher training of saying to people, this is how you can do it, but you can also do this or this or this or this, because there's loads of variations of that one particular pose
Hmm.
that people are not aware of. And I've only kind of discovered that with a lot of research and tinkering and trying things. So I think we need to start from training people, like right from the start of saying,
So even the teacher training is very much like, I suppose it makes sense, because the funnel of yoga teachers is probably different to yourself, where it's like the classic person who's just good at it from the start to get better and better and better, and then
mm,
decide, oh, I could be a yoga teacher from here, like, and
yeah,
that then results in the teacher training being tailored to those kind of people, like. So
exactly.
like, yeah, I think in many ways I do agree with you, and I think that's a positive, a possible thing that we can do. And
Mm,
then for yourself, people, like on the individual level, we probably need to do something as well, where
yeah,
it's like, once I get out of that teacher training, CPD, and realizing that like the people in front of you aren't all exactly like you or whatever, So
exactly.
there's parallels to normal personal training as well in this,
Mm,
where just because you're perfect at it doesn't mean that you have to adapt it to the people coming to you. So
exactly.
if a personal trainer only does classes or plans or anything like that for people who are exactly like them, you'd kind of get kicked out of the industry. So similar, something might happen, something like that should be maybe considered for yoga as well, where you
Yeah,
kind of have to adapt, and that's it.
yeah.
Um, Leslie, that has been class. The one thing I want to do for you right now is add 3 songs to the Gym Advisors playlist. Have you got them in front of you?
I have got them in front of me, yeah.
Can you shout them out there and we'll play them away?
Okay. So the first one is by that guy Hosier, and it's called Almost. The next one is a band called Thieves of Ennui, and it's called Tonight I Died.
Class. Go on
And
again.
then the last one is a band called Lonely the Brave, and that's the Blue, the Green.
Perfect. So we are going to add those 3 to the Spotify playlist. Just search the Gym Advisors playlist on Spotify, because that's where it will be. The Spotify playlist is hosted. Who'd have thought? Lesley, this has been class. You can obviously be found, well, not obviously because it's a business name, thegymadvisors.e/Serenity Yoga, but you're also on social media, all that sort of stuff. Where can people find you?
Yeah. So I'm on Facebook and Instagram, and it's Serenity Yoga Newton Arts, just all one word. And I've got a website as well. And if people Google Serenity Yoga Newton Arts, then the website pops up, and they can email me through that if they have any questions, or just grab me on social media.
Perfect. So, Lesley, this has been class. Like I said at the very beginning, well, first of all, you've written the blog, which if you got this far without reading it, you're a fucking idiot. It's 7-minute read. Go and read it. But Lesley, this has been an absolute pleasure. Like I said at the start, myself and yourself, I've been a fan of yourself for a while, since we first chatted, and I think people who have listened to this will be as well, because what you do and how you do it and where you come from as a story is really captivating, and I hope more people like you can come into the industry and we'll make a bigger difference, you know.
Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed is right. We'll keep fighting the good fight. Lesley, this has been class. Thank you very much.
Thanks so much.
To the rest of you though, as always, hasta la fitness, baby.